things with story-driven games. To me, there are so many different types of games, but they've always felt a little bit like they're an endangered species, something that has to be curated and protected. So Telltale leave the marketplace and have to close shop was like seeing a titan that was representing story-driven games kind of falling by the wayside and leaving a void that still hasn't been filled in this last year. I enjoy a lot of different types of games, but there was something about knowing that when you wanted something that put a story at a premium, that companies like BioWare and Telltale, among others, really were carrying the banner and making sure that story was given in a way that was unlike any other kind of gaming experience. It felt cinematic. It felt immersive. There are so many amazing things about what were created here, and it kind of stings to know that there was a lot left on the table with what this company could have provided in terms of what their creativity they could have leveraged, what with time and in making the adjustments that they were already trying to make, what could have been brought forth.
When you look at the community that they had developed, is Telltale had this incredible and positive following of these players who loved the games they were putting out, who loved that experience, who loved connecting with the characters and the stories they were telling. You mentioned both BioWare and Telltale, and those are immediately the games I think of. When I think of what are my favorite games, they come from one of those two places, because I was always looking for that story. I was looking to engage and empathize with those characters, the challenges they faced, the challenges they overcame, and to be a part of that story, to be a part of that experience. And yeah, to see Telltale fall it's a tragedy, honestly.
Well, and it comes down to connection both internally and externally. I always come back to a story from a peer of mine, a really good friend named Matt. And Matt has no children and talked about how they created a game with The Walking Dead Season 1 that made Clementine his daughter. This connection he felt with this fictional character, how it changed how he played that game. It wasn't just mechanics and story, it was truly being invested. And it's one of those things that I feel is sorely missed. Is we make jokes about immersion, but it's the closest thing to reading a book and not being able to stop turning the page, to finding yourself so caught up in what's happening that you gotta keep playing. You gotta get to the next episode and the next one. And then if you were playing it when it was released, that you were waiting for those weeks for the next one to come out with anticipation.
Well, that's one of the things we talk about when we're having more marketing-focused discussions, is when talking about branding and how you brand yourself, is a lot of that focus becomes on that people connect with people. It's just inherent to who we are. We're humans. Right. And it's such an incredible talent to be able to humanize these fictional characters that you create within a digital platform, within a physical platform like comic books, storybooks, novels. That ability to breathe life into what isn't intrinsically alive, that what isn't actually there, you have to create that, is incredible. And it takes such skill and mastery and forethought to be able to execute that. And Telltale did that consistently.
Well, and it comes down to the cliche of a gift and a curse. I think the big difference is actually how you engage with it. The unexpected success of The Walking Dead was this boon to the ability to invest in Telltale as a company. We saw rapid growth and infrastructural changes, but what we saw on the other side of that is with that opportunity, instead of investing in Telltale's own stories as along with the IP-driven products like that came later with The Wolf Among Us and Batman and the Borderlands series, among many others, is there wasn't a Telltale created game. There wasn't something that was a hallmark of all their own. And I feel that's one of the tragedies, that we never got to see what this amazing writing team could do with all that creativity to leverage with their own thing.
And that's a challenge, right? Because investing in yourself is intrinsically more risky than betting on these IPs. These IPs are already established, but here's a new idea that is truthfully like a newborn baby that you've got to help foster and to grow and protect until it gets to the point where you can put it out there. That's the challenge with developing your own IP. It takes a lot of investment. It takes a lot of time. There isn't necessarily the same level of a safety net with another IP when you're developing your own IP. And so there's a lot of things to factor when you're going this direction. But, and one of the things we'll talk about in the future is there's actually greater profit margin with investing in your own IP.
Well, and both profit fiscally and also internally from a systemic level of creators, there is a joy we get when we bring something that's ours in the world. Sure, I would love an opportunity, even myself, to play with things like Batman, The Walking Dead, almost like they're your own story-driven action figures that you can play with. So I don't want to knock the joy that probably was there for them to play with these characters. In some of the documentaries, like one from No Clip, for example, one of the writers talks about that she loved fan fiction, and this is what it felt like. But where does fan fiction and a reverence for these characters and IPs like Batman, The Walking Dead, among others, transition to the love you can have of creating something that is purely yours, made with a team, putting it out there and seeing it sink or swim? There's an exhilaration that comes with that, and I'm sad not to see that. It's sometimes hard to talk about topics like this without seeming like we're knocking something that has failed and jumping on that. But the truth of the matter is, it truly hurt to see something like this fade away from existence. For me personally, when I remember sharing the news when we saw it last year in the fall, and it was incredibly hard to look at not only human beings who had lost their jobs, but a long list of creatives who, it's so easy to quell creativity, to make us afraid to be creative. And seeing that already in the world with all the dangers it was, I can see how a company would try to play it safe. But the unfortunate thing being that where some of that playing it safe and going back to the well was ultimately what led to probably, and again, we're predicting this. This is not something that truly can be truly gauged. But I would wager that with that success and those teams, that the ability to profit on something that was theirs would give them greater opportunity than going back to the well over and over again. It doesn't mean that the story was ever stagnant. It really means that the way that the story was framed, the bindings and things, there wasn't something new. And I don't know, that's something that sits with me a lot, is that the what if factor with Telltale.
And that's what we're here to talk about, is really to analyze Telltale, to see what key points that maybe had they done something differently, we wouldn't be talking about this, talking about Telltale coming and going, but really talking more about the rise of Telltale and it continuing to grow. Because I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn from a company like this.
Absolutely. And additionally, there are things to learn in terms of, as a creative, as an independent or small team, or anyone who's trying to learn from, and I struggle when I use the words mistakes, but when we see the choices that were made, I think a lot of us can agree that even if we feel that our ideas and our moments of imposter syndrome and self-hatred aren't good enough, I would rather splat on the pavement taking a leap of faith than maybe falling apart knowing that the chances weren't taken to begin with. And that's one of the things I think when I look at them to try to be inspired by it. This is by no means wanting to dump on the struggles that the people who represented this company went through, and still are going through and trying to find gainful employment. It's about realizing that as creatives, I feel that there's always a cost, and it comes due some point. Sometimes it's the upfront cost of actually making that leap versus the persistent battling against monotony and eventually finding that those diminishing returns lead to finding yourself in the negative. So take note, Telltale was a company that was a master at shaping stories, all the stories but their own. The pacing, the sustainability, the challenges, the rises and falls didn't fall in proper pacing to keep it alive. That's the real tragedy. A story that was meant to be a heroic tale became a tragic void in the creative industry, especially in gaming where story is at a premium and so lacking so often.